everybody. Happy Friday. Just going to go through some of the stories from today. I'm Justin with the Holler. We're tnholler.com. At the TN Holler is where you can find us. We also have hollers across the state, all because of you and also the support of Elisa Parker, who we always need to mention is our sponsor. If you're buying or selling a house, check her out. What we've been doing with these Holler rundowns is basically going through the email that we send out twice a week, just going over the stories. And if you really want the stories, subscribe to us at tnholler.com. But we'll go over the stories here too, just to kind of go through them. Also break down some of the videos and show some of the videos that we included in the Holler emails where you can subscribe. We only send 2 a week, so check those out. The big story that I just wanted to talk about here was this report from ProPublica and WPLN. WPLN is basically the NPR arm here in Tennessee. And they have this ridiculous story, just wild, about Rutherford County and how insane the rate is at which they jail kids, especially black kids. Just a wild piece talking about basically how the average that kids get jailed, the average amount of cases that lead to the jailing of children is 5%. And in Rutherford County, their number is 48%. So 48% of the juvenile cases that come before, I guess, this judge, Donna Davenport, who calls herself the mother of this, end up with the jailing of children, which is just a crazy number. And the story itself talks about how basically they even like make up crimes to jail these kids over. We're talking about kids like 8 years old, third graders, sixth graders, fourth graders, yes, a little bit older at times, but the story that it focuses on is this insane story where there was a fight at a school. There were like 10 kids that watched it. Cops showed up to arrest the kids for not stopping it. Something crazy like that. And then this judge, Donna Davenport, who is there by the will of the people, she is an elected judge and up for election again soon, basically says it's God's mission. She sees it as not just a job, but a mission. And it's just insane. So, I think it's a reminder of the impunity with which our judicial system operates. Judges, DAs, sheriffs, all elected, and, always screaming about local control and states' rights. Well, there's just so little oversight with all of this stuff. And what up, Kim? I see you guys. What up, Ari? Thanks for jumping in again. But yeah, check out that article. Again, you can subscribe to our emails and we'll send the article right to your inbox, tnholler.com. But that one really blew my mind. It's one that my wife works in that world. And, I think we knew that Tennessee was rough when it came to disciplining kids in general. There's still places where corporal punishment is legal, but to see that Rutherford County specifically is such an outlier, 48% of those cases end up in jailing. What up, Carlos? How are you? Thanks for joining as always. I feel like even Carlos would have to admit that 48% of cases ending up with jailing children, probably a little high, and needs to be looked at. And so appreciate WPLN and ProPublica for talking about that. This is Davenport in the article. She calls herself the mother of the county. And if you know anybody in Rutherford County, make sure to let them know that is way too high and that they need to vote next time she's up and make sure they vote her out. Speaking of crime, another article that's in there is from a guy named Judd Legume, who his newsletter is called Popular Info. Highly suggest subscribing to it. He's got a piece about the crime in America. A big talking point right now, I'm sure Carlos is out there talking about it, is the crime wave in democratic cities and how the violent crime is everywhere, and it's because of defunding the police. Well, the numbers don't back that up. The uptick that they're talking about happened last year. A lot of it was under Trump. And, it's a slight uptick, but overall violent crime in America is very much down. And then the other part of it is it's not just in Democratic controlled areas. It happened everywhere. And it wasn't because of defunding the police, which really didn't happen in most places. So it's a talking point that you hear from Republicans, mostly because they are, okay, here's Carlos with his racism. Carlos, you sound like, any racist with this. Thug parents need to be held responsible for their thug kids. Okay. It's that thug word is obviously tinged with racism, and I highly recommend not using it because it's embarrassing for you, and it's ugly. And if you mean it to talk about white kids, also great, but it generally that's what they call Trayvon Martin a thug, and that thug word is just something you should get out of your vocabulary. It's lazy and nasty. But that talking point, the numbers don't back it up. Speaking of numbers not backing things up, or lies that are out there, a couple of fact checks. There's another thing about this, like idea that Biden's plan calls for every transaction over $600 to be reported to the IRS. Well, that's another talking point. And there's a Snopes piece about it that it's not every $600 transaction where they get all the details. It's an aggregate. It's not, each itemized thing. It's really just about, monitoring the in and out flow from bigger accounts. And this is just something they've seized on to try to drum up antagonism to Biden's plan, which is something that we very much need for all of these reasons. And anybody that's against Biden's budget should be asked which of these items in the $350 billion a year plan, not $3.5 trillion, because that's over 10 years, are they against? Are they against climate investment? Are they against the child tax credit, which has gotten half of the kids that were in child poverty, living in poverty, out? Is it about Medicare, expanding dental, vision, and hearing in Medicare, which, by the way, during the football game last night, there was a really disingenuous commercial about Medicare expansion, trying to scare older people into thinking that somehow expanding Medicaid is actually limiting Medicare is about limiting Medicare, which it isn't. It's a lie. And, it's kind of gross that those ads keep getting run, but they do. Housing and homelessness, are they against that? Are they against paid leave, which exists in almost every other country but ours? Elder care, universal pre-K, child care, expanding Obamacare, Medicaid expansion in our states, which we lose $1.5 billion a year. We don't do that. Free community college. So when Marsha and her people come out against Biden's plan, against this bill, they need to be asked which specifically of these things are they against? Because these are the things that they're against. And, we talk about taxing the wealthy to pay for it. Nobody over $400,000 a year will see a tax hike. That's true, but I don't like talking about it as a pay for. I think we need to talk about it as, where do you want to see the money go? Do you want to see it to go to corporations and the wealthy, or do you want to see it to go to programs like this? And I think the framing is really important. So, Carlos, you say thugs cover all races. Maybe that's how you mean it. That's not how people hear it. And so I would ask you to think about that. Angela, now we're back to talking about the Rutherford County Post. Angela says, reacting to children's behavior instead of addressing the systemic causes is futile. Completely agree with that. I think in general, all of this stuff goes back to poverty and inequality and forces people into tough situations where sometimes parents aren't around as much or can't be around as much. And it all goes back to inequality and poverty, and which is why passing a budget like this is so important for paid leave, for child tax credit, that kind of thing. So I think you guys are absolutely right about that. Ganny says defunding the police is often used as an excuse by elected officials to explain and justify their own failures. 100% true. That's a good point. And again, oh my God. So Carlos beats his kid. That's good to know. That's good to know. Carlos says, spare the rod, spoil the child. So I feel bad. Carlos, I hope you don't have any kids. If you do, and you're hitting them, stop that. That's horrible. That's abuse. Don't hit your kids. But thank you for acknowledging your transgressions. Yes, Good to see Trump cuck Carlos simping for the right. Yep. Yikes. Ari says, yeah, Carlos, you're really revealing yourself. Appreciate it. Get help. And again, stop hitting your kids. I mean, I don't appreciate having people on here that are hitting their kids and acting like it's something that they should be doing. More lies. Moving on. More lies. Again, we're talking about anything that's in our twice weekly emails at the Holler. So you can subscribe to get our emails at tnholler.com, and you'll get all these articles. I'm going through kind of what's in there now. There's another set of lies that Marsha's been telling, and this one is about Attorney General Garland came out this week and said that a school board, national school board group, has been asking Garland to step in about the threats and the harassment and intimidation that's going on at school boards across the country. And so Marsha Blackburn and Hawley and other senators have seized on that to say, oh, you know, this is just Garland trying to intimidate conservatives and their free speech, and acting as though threats and harassment and intimidation are non-existent, don't actually exist. And no, this is about threats. You can read Merrick Garland's memo for yourself. It's entirely reasonable. It's entirely focused on threats and intimidation, which we've seen here in Tennessee specifically. And Chris Hayes had a supercut going after Hawley's disingenuous bullshit. We repurposed it for Marsha, and here it is.
Does it raise civil rights concerns when the government attempts to intimidate citizens who are exercising their First Amendment freedom of speech?
We know who you are. We know who you are. You can leave freely, but we will find you, and we know who you are. We know who you are.
Did the teachers union write a letter to DOJ asking you to use the Patriot Act to target concerned parents who voice their opposition to the indoctrination of their children?
The death threat was, you're going to get knifed, you're going to get you're dead.
A parent going to a school board and expressing their dismay with CRT or with the mask mandate.
People were actually throwing fists and hitting each other outside the auditorium this evening after the board unanimously voted to approve requiring masks.
It's not protected speech. Is that what you're saying?
One of the board members, they called for her and her children to choke and die. Another one said that the board member was about to get ruined.
Did President Biden promise to keep the DOJ apolitical?
Another one suggested another board member die by suicide.
So it would concern you if there was an exercise against an individual's free speech, correct?
Calling also for harassment and bullying of board members.
You get the point. So basically, the idea here is Marsha Blackburn wants you to think that Garland is intimidating conservatives and their ability to express themselves about critical race theory, blah, blah, blah. But no, these are real threats. This is really happening. These people are going after school board members, and Garland is stepping in and saying, we're not going to allow that. So they paint a bullseye on the backs of school board members across the country and then act like, oh, you know, act all innocent when people start going after them and try to paint themselves as the victim. So that's what's going on here. Marsha, we see you. Yes, Kim says it's funny how conservatives' free speech is always somehow being impeded. Right. Absolutely ridiculous. Ari says, you're subscribing. Appreciate that. tnholler.com is where you can get all this. And, you know, we just repurposed this so that you could see that Marsha is entirely full of shit, to put it mildly. And again, this is not about conservative free speech. This is not about intimidating conservatives. This is about them intimidating school board members. And Steve Bannon wrote a piece about Marsha's over-the-top case against Biden's agenda. You know, all of her lies and fear-mongering, just they make it so hard to take her seriously. And Angela says if it were impeded, we wouldn't be hearing them. That's exactly right. So, you know, this is just something to keep in mind. Marsha's feed right now is full of this stuff. It's just all nonsense. You know, obviously, Merrick Garland is not going after people's ability to speak freely at school boards, and they are taking the opportunity to speak freely at school boards. Here is one woman in Knoxville who she certainly spoke freely at a school board, basically doing what they tend to do a lot these days, which is uh, equating themselves with the Holocaust.
My 14th Amendment right that this is my body and this is my choice. It is no longer an isolation room. It is no longer a segregation. As my son puts it, it is a concentration camp that he goes to 8 hours a day every morning.
Okay, so she's saying that in Knox County, where they have a mask mandate and the kids that are refusing to wear masks get put in a room to learn in a room for the day, she's calling that a concentration camp, even though they've been bragging about sending them pizzas there. And she sends her kid to this room 8 hours a day voluntarily. So she's voluntarily sending her kid to a concentration camp. What kind of mother does that make her? So in general, I would just express some caution to our friends on the right. Like, stop equating things with slavery, stop equating things with the Holocaust. They want so badly to be victimized and put upon and oppressed. And it just shows you how little they understand about actual oppression. And so it's just completely absurd and extremely hard to take them seriously when they take it to that place. And yes, again, Kim says it's funny how they always act like their free speech is being impeded. It's just completely ridiculous. Carlos, your talking points are so stale, man. It's like really, really boring at this point. Hunter Biden's art. This is what you're talking about. Come on, man. Do better than that. Do better. Like, just do better. That's all I can say on that. I mean, nobody cares about Hunter Biden's art. By the way, there's an article today about how Trump funneled millions through his tanking hotels, the most corrupt president we've ever had, not even close. And then also, I'm sure you don't watch Maddow, but last night she laid out very clearly how Trump tried to steal the election using the Justice Department. He had a plan. They were going to send a letter from the Justice Department, Jeffrey Clark, to state legislators in Georgia, places like that, saying that there's a lot of fraud and that they're not sure, just so the state legislatures can refuse to certify the election. He could steal the election. And then his U.S. attorney, one actually did resign in Georgia. His whole Justice Department threatened to resign. There were going to be mass resignations across the country, and they didn't actually send that letter, but they were going to steal the election. And you probably think Biden stole the election. I'm guessing you are dead wrong. You are delusional. But Trump actually tried to, and they will try to again. And what I'm confused about is, how is conspiring to steal an election not a crime? Like, why are we setting a precedent here where conspiring to steal an election is not a crime? That's what I don't get. And I feel like Merrick Garland should be doing something about that, but they don't really seem to be. So that is the precedent being set by Republicans right now. And then another video that's in our email today, the paranoia and fear. Let me see what you guys are saying here. Trump kids demonized, Hunter gets a pass. Yeah. Those poor Trump kids, Carlos. Man, you are in deep, bro. You are in deep. Donald Trump Jr., the cokehead, deserves to be demonized. All he does is demonize people. They are corrupt. They steal from their own charity. Trump cheats on his wife, pregnant wife, in bed with the Russians. Absolutely. It's just really corrupt people. And a damn shame that you can't see it. I feel bad for you. One day you will. I believe you. Heather says, conservatives getting mad about things they made up themselves. Absolutely. Yes, Hunter's a drug user, Carlos. That's true. There's a lot of drug users, and I guarantee you so is Donald Trump Jr. The paranoia and fear campaign among the least oppressed, most privileged is astounding. It really is. Speaking of oppressed or poor people, poor folks, this was from Senator Rand Paul. Just an absolutely amazing clip of him. We have Gilded Age levels of inequality in our country, and rampant poverty. Tennessee is at the bottom when it comes to poverty. But good news for those that are impoverished here. Rand Paul has a plan for how to fix it, and his plan for how to fix poverty is to just tell people, you know what, you're not actually poor. Here's Rand Paul.
When you look at poverty, less than $2 a day in the world, it's less than 10% of the world. You won't find this on television. There's not going to be any good news on television or in the newspaper. The poorest people in our country actually are equivalent to the middle class in most countries. We are a huge success, but we're a country misguided and led astray by media that aren't honest.
So that's a multimillionaire basically telling poor people in America don't actually feel poor because there's poorer people in the rest of the world. And while that's true, there are poorer people in the rest of the world. The cost of living is not as high in some of those places, but also that does not mean that that's where the bar should be and that we shouldn't address poverty in America. And if you don't think there's poverty in America, I would encourage you to get out of your little circle and go to some of the poorest parts of the state, in our cities, in our rural parts of the state. When I tell this story a lot, and I apologize if you've heard it before, but when I was running for Congress, Heather says he's a moron. I agree. When I was running for Congress, there's a thing called remote area medical that goes to third world countries to give them healthcare in places they can't afford it or that they don't have access to it. And they have realized that Tennessee has such a need for it that they show up here a lot. They go to Knoxville, and they came to Columbia near us. And I went there, and there were a parking lot full of cars that had slept there the night before to get in line at like 4 a.m. to go see a dentist or a doctor. And most of them hadn't seen one since the last time remote area medical was there. And it straight up felt like a third world country. And it was absolutely devastating to see. And I highly recommend anybody go check that out if you haven't seen anything like it. But there is poverty and pain and misery in our country. We are one of the only developed nations that doesn't guarantee health care for our citizens. It's time to fix that. And it's an embarrassment. And another thing that's embarrassing is this chart. This is a chart the New York Times put out this week. This is how much governments spend on childcare for toddlers. And you can see Norway spends something like $30,000 a kid, 24,000. That's all the Scandinavian countries that get dismissed as socialist. Moving down, you see us at the very bottom. We spend $500 per child on early childhood care. An absolute embarrassment. You cannot consider yourself pro-life if you think that's okay. I'm sorry. It's not just about forcing women to have children. It has to be about taking care of the kids when they're in the world. And this is a big part of the problem right here. We don't invest in ourselves, and this is why we need to pass a budget like the one that we're talking about. Kim says I should run again. I mean, I have no plans to do that right now. I honestly feel like hollering is, something that I can do. But maybe one day I will. I'm not ruling anything out. But again, Rand Paul saying the solution to poverty is just tell poor people they're not poor. I mean, it's crazy. We need to invest in our kids. And speaking of investing in our kids, there was some news today that Governor Lee is now launching a review of the BEP program. So basically how we fund our schools per kid. Our per pupil funding is at the bottom. We're like 43rd in the nation based on per pupil funding, 4,000 less per kid than the nationwide average in our schools. So we do underfund education. Democrats have been saying for a long time that we need to put up another $1.5 billion per year just to get out of the bottom in education. And Governor Lee is now launching a review of our BEP formula, which is something that Republicans have been saying for a long time is not broken or is fully funded. We say we fully fund our BEP formula, which is true, but the BEP formula has not been updated in a very long time. So now it looks like, okay, Governor Lee's going to take a look at that. We have something like $3 billion in a rainy day fund. Great. Let's look at putting some of that into education. Biden has sent us a bunch of money through the stimulus and rescue plans, and more is coming. But then you look at this part of the story, which is concerning, where it says a student-centered approach is likely. The new model will likely take a more student-centered approach. Penny Schwinn, our education commissioner, told the Tennessean, could mean allowing the state to establish a weighted student-based formula where a certain amount of funding follows every student, no matter where they go to school. Okay, sounds nice, but we have to remember that money following students no matter where they go to school is a voucher program. That is essentially what the plan was for Governor Lee's unconstitutional voucher program that was only going to be instituted in Memphis and Nashville because rural Republican legislators didn't want anything to do with it in their counties. So now that they're going to revisit the BEP funding formula, the question we have to ask ourselves or be wary of is this a backdoor way into vouchers? Carlos says we spend huge dollars on public education and get lousy results. We also don't spend enough. And we need to look at why that is. We don't pay our teachers enough. There's a lot of reasons that we need to look at what goes on with public education. But if you're against public education in general, then you're very much on your own there, my friend. And I believe that a big part of, we need to invest in public education in general, and we can look at why certain places do better than others. But a big part of it is that we are underinvesting in it, and that we are not, and it's also about an inequality issue, because where are public schools good? Public schools are good in counties like ours here in Williamson County, where there's a lot of money in the surrounding areas to make up for the shortfall. There's parents who can afford to give to local schools, and it is an inequality issue when you have communities that don't have the ability to invest at a local level. They don't have the property taxes, et cetera. You can look at the numbers and you can see that in general, public schools are better in wealthier areas. And that is not a coincidence. So we don't spend huge amounts. Our teachers are paid crap wages. Absolutely true. That's especially true here. More and more we're hearing about kids that are teachers that are planning on leaving. Angela says his intentions will be to use some of it for vouchers. I think it's absolutely true. We know that for sure. And the average Joe looks at the budget and sees a lot of money, but have no idea what the realistic cost is to fully function. 100% true. So yeah, it just looks like a lot of money. And it is a lot of money. And that's exactly why Republicans are going after it, because they see it as a place to to basically like a place to raid. Why aren't the rich liberals spending their money to help out the poorer school districts? I mean, rich liberals are the ones who are pushing for more taxes so that we send government funding to those districts. So that is what's happening. And it's the Republicans who are saying, no, let's not do that. So we are the ones, liberals, Democrats, progressives, whatever you want to call us, who are saying, yes, we need to spend a little more, to tax ourselves a little more, to send money to schools, to invest. That is what we want to do. But it's not going to work just on a, philanthropic, like, oh, here's some money to a local school basis. That's not how problems get solved in this country, Carlos. That is not a real solution. Real solutions come from doing something as a country together, as a state together. And that's what we're pushing for. So, it's like saying, why don't the churches, just leave it up to the churches? Well, if leaving it up to the churches were a real solution, Tennessee wouldn't be at the bottom in infant mortality, at the bottom in maternal mortality, at the bottom in poverty, because we have the most churches per capita. Yet we're at number one in medical bankruptcies, at the bottom in poverty. Our hospitals are closing. So these aren't real solutions. These are talking points. Real solutions are actually being willing to invest in ourselves. And that's what we're pushing for. And so I appreciate you coming here to hopefully learn a thing or two about that, Carlos. And your solutions are not actually solutions. They're just talking points. So I hope you let that in. And then just as a last video to play you before we get up out of here, appreciate you guys doing this. If you guys are into these, roundups of our Holler emails, I'm happy to keep doing them. I enjoy kind of venting to you. So let me know. But one last video that I wanted to play is of one of the senators who's standing in the way of this very important budget that Biden and the progressives and others are trying to pass. Manchin and Sinema are the two problems. And Sinema has been running away from her constituents in Arizona. As Carlos brought up last time, a couple of them followed her into a bathroom, which, okay, that might have been too far, but she ran into the bathroom to avoid them. It's a public bathroom. They're allowed to go in there. Anyway, But here she was outside at an event, probably just raised a bunch of money. And one of her constituents saw her there and went up to her and asked her a perfectly valid question.
Them back. So we call that the Mayo Shuttle.
I love it. I love it.
Hi. Thank you.
Hi there. Hi, Congresswoman. Who are you gonna leave out for the Build Back Better Biden agenda? Can you talk with us, please, today, Congresswoman? Senator Sinema, would you please tell?
So right there, this voter is calling her Congresswoman, asking her completely valid. Good. I'm glad you guys enjoy the talks. Thank you for telling me that. It does help to hear that. And so we'll keep doing it. Generally Tuesdays and Fridays is when we send the email. So I'll hop on. And liberals do give away their money without being forced to. They don't wait to be taxed more. I mean, that does happen, Carlos. So these are just things you're saying. But anyway, back to the cinema video. She's asking her who you're going to leave out. Are you going to leave out the elderly, healthcare, all that? The one thing Senator Sinema cared about was that she was calling her Congresswoman and not Senator. That she responded to. Not who are you going to leave out of this budget? Are you going to hurt older people and their healthcare, Medicare expansion? No, all that mattered to her was call me Senator and not Congresswoman. And she actually says it. You can see her whisper it to her lackey first. And then when she says it again, Congresswoman, Sinema can't help herself and she blurts it out. And I just think it's so telling that Sinema is way more concerned with her title than she is with what this budget is going to do for people.
Hi.
Thank you.
Hi there. Hi, Congresswoman. Who are you gonna leave out for the Build Back Better Biden agenda?
Senator.
Can you talk with us?
She says,
please, today, Congresswoman.
Senator. It's just she can't help it. She can't help it. Senator. It's Senator. I'm a senator. Like that's what matters to Senator Sinema, is that she be called Senator as she raises money from donors who are trying to block a bill that will help a lot of people. And then here is the other dead giveaway about Sinema. And this is just awesome. This was a deleted tweet of hers from 2011 where she says, asking big corporations and the rich to pay their fair share is common sense, not class warfare, which is true. And this is what she tweeted in 2011. And now she has deleted it. So I think that says all you need to know about where her priorities have gone over time, over the years. And it's important to point out again that Trump's tax cuts increase the debt by $2 trillion. Biden's agenda will not, no matter what they're telling you, that Trump's deficit exploding tax cuts and agenda happened in 2020. You can see it here, and that in general, Democrats are the ones decreasing the deficit while Republicans increase it. And then also, it is not a $3 trillion budget bill. It's $350 billion a year for 10 years. So if you're going to call our military budget $770 billion, then this is $350 billion. And also, by the way, it's popular. It's very popular. So people support it. Biden supports it. Progressives support it. And you have Sinema and Manchin doing the bidding of donors and the wealthy to stand in its way. Thank you for joining me here today. One thing to keep in mind, coming up on October 18th and the 27th, there are going to be two special sessions. The first one on October 18th is going to be so Governor Lee can hand $500 million in subsidies to an electric car plant in Memphis. Meanwhile, they're calling Biden a socialist for doing stuff like that at the federal level. So that's deeply hypocritical. And then theoretically, there's going to be an October 27th special session where they're going to do things like outlaw mask mandates and employer vaccine mandates and let people sue for adverse vaccine reactions, which is a whole can of worms. So that's the pro-COVID special session, October 27th, and we'll make sure to cover that. Christina, thanks for asking. Our donation link is at tnholler.com is where you can find us and donate. Everything helps. The small dollar monthly donations keep us growing and keep us going. And we have hollers all across the state. So definitely make sure to follow the hollers near you. And that is, that's at tnholler.com. But the hollers are all throughout the state. We've added 10 in the past year. Really proud of them. They're all doing great work. And definitely spread the word if you can. Make it $10 a month or more, and we'll send you one of these hats that I'm wearing. And we really, really appreciate you guys. Again, subscribe to the emails, and that's where you can find this stuff. Otherwise, we'll see you next week.